Oh, the poor Atlanta Falcons. At least this year, they won a playoff game, but just one, and barely won that one at that. Now, to be fair to the Atlanta Falcons, they really did have a good 2012 season. I mean, this was a team that started off very hot out of the gate and kept it up pretty much throughout the year. They, at times, had to struggle to win games. Other teams maybe beat themselves, but you have to give credit where credit is due. You don't end up with a 13-3 record by accident, which is exactly what the Falcons ended up with, finishing first in the NFC South and ending up with the number one overall seed in the NFC playoffs. And they beat Seattle at home, barely. They had to pull it out at the last minute, and eventually went on to lose in the NFC Championship game to the San Francisco 49ers. One of the things that surely has to be disheartening for the Falcons players, the team, the organization, the fans, is the fact that the Falcons had a nice sized lead, in particular against San Francisco, only to slowly piss it down their legs. And now people could sit there and blame it just on the defense, or they could talk about Matt Ryan failed to show up in the second half, whatever the case might be. But, you know, to be fair, everybody kind of shares in it a little bit, because when you have that big of a lead and you give up that big of a lead, that means the defense is giving up yards and points, and that means the offense stops gaining yards and stops scoring points. Now, Matt Ryan, I'm sure, is getting a lot of blame in the offseason for a lackluster performance in the second half of that NFC Championship game. And frankly, when you're the franchise quarterback and you don't play well, you kind of deserve it. You know, it's just kind of goes with the territory. When you play well and your team wins, you get 90 to 95% of the praise. It's only fair that you get a large portion of the blame, even if you aren't the only person that's responsible for the loss. It's what I said about Peyton Manning in Denver this year. He wasn't the only reason that they lost, but he shouldn't be absolved of 90 or 95% of the blame. He's the quarterback, he's the man, and he does share in some of the responsibility, no question about it. Now, offensively in 2012, the Falcons became a little bit more of a one-dimensional team in my eyes. Matt Ryan had a very, very good year, threw for over 4,700 yards, 32 touchdowns, only 14 interceptions. Roddy White and Julio Jones really are a nice 1-2 combination on the outside at wide receiver. Roddy White had over 90 catches, over 1,350 yards, 7 touchdowns. Julio Jones had 79 catches for about 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. And of course, the ageless wonder himself, Tony Gonzalez, in what hopefully wasn't his last season in the NFL. He had over 90 catches, 930 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So you had 3 really nice weapons at Matt Ryan's disposal in the passing game. Now, this is a team that for years has been built on, being able to control the clock and use a ball control running style to really help protect Matt Ryan and help control the clock late in game, move the chains. He didn't really get a lot of that in 2012. The offense finished 7th in points scored, 8th in total yardage, and 6th in passing yardage, but only 29th in rushing yards. So definitely an area of concern for the Falcons was the fact that Michael Turner is getting older. He wasn't nearly as effective. And at times they just really struggled to run the ball. And you saw that in particular, I believe, in the second half of the game against the Niners in the NFC Championship. Now, you look at the defensive side of the ball. This was a team that gave up a lot of yards, but not necessarily a ton of points. They finished 5th in points allowed, but 24th overall in yards allowed, 23rd in passing yards, and 28th in sacks. So when you sit there and say, well, why did this team struggle to stop people at times and allow them to get so much yardage on them? It was because of, among other things, their inability to generate a pass rush with their front four on a consistent basis. Now, I know this was a disheartening season for Falcons fans in some ways, and maybe they felt that, you were going to get to a certain point and they knew something was going to go wrong. And it's a shame, but that's the reality. The Falcons just weren't the best team in the NFL this year. They're close. They're not that far off. And how did they get to this point? Well, let's take a look at their draft history. To put it frankly, Thomas Dimitroff's draft history during his time in Atlanta from 2008 on, I don't think is spectacular. He's had a couple of good drafts and a couple of, frankly, bad drafts. Now, 2008 stands out as the best draft, if for no other reason than the fact is they got Matt Ryan. When you get your franchise quarterback in a draft, that makes that draft a whole hell of a lot better, even if all the other players are complete flops. And having a real franchise quarterback like Matt Ryan is in Atlanta can help mask some other deficiencies in some other areas or make up for some other poor draft choices. Now, Sam Baker, the other first-round pick in 2008, I've never been a huge fan of, and I think this year was the first year that he really played at any level that was worth a crap. Thomas DeCoud, excuse me, their fourth round pick at safety. You know, he's been solid, not spectacular to me, anyways, but solid. William Moore is the only real value they've gotten out of the 2009 draft. Perry Jerry has been pretty much a total flop, can't stay healthy, etc. 2010, Sean Witherspoon, who's a stud himself as an outside linebacker, was pretty much it. So you're looking at two draft classes where you only got really one player that contributed out of them. Now, to be fair, one of those drafts, the 2010 draft, I believe it was, where they didn't have a second rounder, that second rounder was used to acquire Tony Gonzalez. So that makes that draft at least a little more productive. Now, 2011 was primarily all about trading up big to go get Julio Jones. And to be fair, it was the right decision. Taking one Julio Jones is like taking three other solid players. It was worth giving up all those picks to go up and get a guy who was such a big playmaker. Now, Jacques Rodgers, he's been a solid change of pace back in Atlanta. But that was pretty much it out of that draft. And then from 2012, you've got Peter Kahns, who I'm pretty sure they're going to slide into center at 2013 because he's a mediocre right guard, I think much better suited for center, and there will probably be an opening there, and that's where he'll be more successful. But as of this moment, that's pretty much all that's been productive out of that draft class. Dimitroff's draft history I don't think is good as some of the experts and the talking heads want to make it out to be. He already had Roddy White in the picture. John Abraham was already there, and he's getting older. It helps when you draft Matt Ryan, no question. He had the balls to go up and get Julio Jones. But when you frankly look at their draft history since Dimitroff took over in 2008, this is not by any means the best drafting team in the league. They've had some nice hits, but they've also had some very big misses. They're just very fortunate trading a second round for Tony Gonzalez, that Julio Jones has worked out the way he has. They already had Roddy White in-house, and that Matt Ryan has panned out so well, because that helps make up for a lot. But this is a team heading into this offseason that has some holes that really need to be addressed if they want to take that next step and really become a legit Super Bowl contender. Now, even with, I think, the somewhat checkered drafting of Thomas Dimitroff, I still think the Falcons are in a very good position in this upcoming draft. Now, you're going to hear a lot of draft experts and talking heads and even probably people in the Falcons organization talking about the need to improve the defense in the offseason, and it does, frankly, need to be improved, especially in the front seven. They need help at defensive end, especially. They need help at defensive tackle. They need help in that linebacking core as well. But what I don't want to see the Falcons do is become so obsessed and so focused on improving the defensive side of the ball that they potentially, especially in the first round of the draft, pass up on an offensive player that's a better overall player that could also help fill a need on the offensive side of the ball. Because even as good as this offense was, there are holes, there are needs. They could use some help on the offensive line, even though that might not be a top priority. If Tony Gonzalez retires, boy, tight end just became a whole lot more important on the old pecking order. To me, even with Roddy White and Julio Jones, I think you need more than, as great as those two wide receivers are, perhaps arguably the best 1-2 receiver combination in the NFL, they really miss and lack a slot guy. Harry Douglas is not it. They could really utilize and benefit from having some type of slot receiver who could run short slants and hook patterns, and you could do different things with him out of the slot. He would really help open up things for White and Jones on the outside, in my humble opinion. But perhaps not only the single biggest need on that offense, but perhaps the single biggest need on that team is running back. What's one way you can help your defense and keep them rested is to control the clock. Control the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the ball. And you could do that with a great power running game. And for several years, that has been a key to success for Atlanta, especially in the regular season, was being able to hand the ball off to Michael the Burner Turner and have him gain yards and eat up clock and control time of possession. Well, Michael the Burner Turner is about all burnt out. I'm not convinced by any stretch that Jacques Rodgers is anything more than a nice change of pace, number 2 type of running back. I don't think the Atlanta Falcons should sit there and look at their draft board and become so focused and so consumed with improving the front seven of their defense, or even maybe taking a secondary player in the first round, that they pass up a running back that could, one, be a better talent, and two, fill just as big of an important of a need on the offensive side of the football. I mean, this is a team that, even as good as they are, they still have some big holes. To me, they should just go with the best player available at a position of need throughout the entire draft. On defense, whether that's a defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, somebody in the secondary, offensive-wise, talking about running back, tight end, a slot receiver, some type of interior offensive lineman. Play the board, take the best player available at one of those major positions of need, and if the Falcons do that throughout the draft, I think it could bear out and have some big benefits for them in 2013 and beyond.